You've got that huge rush of adrenaline when they're about to say, let's join our commentators. I think I was probably paid about 35 quid to be at that game. You want to feel a bit like a fan with a microphone at times. I found myself commentating on every single Chelsea game, home and away, and I was ballsy. It's entirely your creative juices flowing. I did 115 games last season. I mean, that was just mind-blowing for me. That I felt I'd made it. I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but there are one or two stadiums where, so you've got to find a way.
Would your younger self have believed that you would be a commentator on Sky Sports in 2024?
Well, that was the dream. That was the dream growing up. From about the age of 14, 15, that was what I'd set myself a target of. I never obviously thought it would happen, and my parents thought I was mad. But yeah, that was obviously, if I could go back and say, yes, you've achieved that dream up to a point, then whether I'd believe it, I'm not sure, but it was always the ambition. And, you know, it's quite, if you know at that age that you've got that focus and that ambition, then it does make life a little bit easier because you can direct all of your choices in education and work experience towards that. And obviously, you need a lot of luck along the way. You need things to go for you. And if opportunities do come your way through luck, you need to grab them and grasp them and really make the most of them. But yeah, that was the dream, Lewis. To actually go on and achieve it, yeah, gosh, incredible, really. And it was a long old journey. You know, I was working in football. Not my very first job, actually. I was working on a local newspaper, but I always saw that as a stepping stone because I knew I wanted to work in football. And really, from my second job onwards, that was the idea of becoming a commentator. But it doesn't just happen overnight. And actually, it took me until the age of 29 before I was actually given a game by Sky, a match choice game. And I'd been commentating for years in radio before that. So it was a long old road. And I think if you are, you know, if you want to be a commentator, then trust me, you really do have to have that drive and passion, because it's not something that happens overnight. You know, it's a horrendously competitive industry, and you've got to be prepared to go the extra mile and work harder, and in many occasions for free, just to get to that stage later on. And, you know, I saw friends of mine who'd gone into completely different industries just sail ahead of me in terms of earnings and moving out of home. And I was thinking, you know, am I doing the right thing here? Because I was definitely lagging behind. But it was my dream, you know. I was a bit of a romantic, and I really felt that it was something that I could achieve. So, yeah, it paid off in the end. But there were times where I thought, should I really be doing this? You know, is there going to be an ending and an outcome that's going to be correct here? But thankfully, there was.
Yeah, and where do you think that ambition came from at such a young age to know exactly what you wanted to do?
Well, watching lots of football on TV, I guess. I've said this before, but that 1990 World Cup in Italy, when I was, 14, that's the first real major tournament that I can remember so clearly. And I think I must have watched every game because I was bunking off school to watch the matches, or even watching them in school. And I became fascinated with the broadcast as much as the match. And the idea that you could actually have a career as a commentator had never, ever dawned on me before. I remember saying to my dad, these guys who were commentating, Barry Davis, John Motson, Brian Moore, Tony Gubber, all of these great names. I said to my dad, is this their actual job? Do they do this for a career? And he said, no, this is what they do. And I just couldn't believe that you could have a job where you're traveling around the world and watching football, and not only that, but your voice is on these big moments, and the words that you choose is on that footage forever. That to me was just mind blowing, and I just thought, I want to be doing that. I think you've got to have a certain amount of ego, haven't you? Because you're thinking to yourself, I want my voice on these big moments. But that was just so appealing to me. So yeah, that's where that ambition came from. And then, I know you spoke to Jim recently, and obviously he was a bit ahead of me time-wise, but we came through a similar route of working for Capital Gold, for Jonathan Pearce, and sadly that route has kind of been cut off. I spent years listening to Capital Gold because I lived in South London, Surrey, and I dreamt of being on that program, because it was something so new and so fresh and so different. The way they were broadcasting football had never been done like that before. And I just, I would, like in the evening, I would time taking the dog for a walk so I could listen to it on my headphones. I was walking around the woods, and I would record it and listen back to it. Proper nerdy obsession. And when I actually got the opportunity to report on that program, I just could not believe that had happened. And, it took a series of, happy coincidences for that to happen. But then I was sitting there at Fulham, first round of the FA Cup. I think it was against Northampton. And I had JP in my ear commentating on wherever he was, Arsenal. And there'd been a goal and I knew he was going to cue to me at any moment. And for him to say, right, let's go to Craven Cottage. Here's Gary Taphouse. I mean, that was just mind-blowing for me. That I felt I'd made it, I think I was probably paid about 35 quid to be at that game. And I sat at the press box at Craven Cottage from 12 noon until 5 p.m. And I did not move a muscle in case I was needed. But that was just absolutely incredible to me that I was on that show. And that's, from there, I was able to move on to bigger and better things. But being part of that that award-winning program where so many people have come through, a lot of the names that you are really familiar with today came through that route. People like, great commentators like Steve Wilson, like Ian Crocker, like Bill Leslie, who I worked with at Sky, loads of others, and they all came through that Capital Gold route. And it's such a shame that commercial local radio has kind of died a death when it comes to sport. I don't think there's a single local commercial radio station in the country now that's broadcasting football. There might be one. So that route's kind of been closed off for younger commentators, which is a huge, huge shame. But other avenues have opened up, like clubs doing their own commentary. And a lot of young commentators that I've mentored, that's a route that they've come through, where they've sort of battled their way onto a club's own channel and have got heard and recognized that way.
Yeah. And I'm really fascinated to know, so obviously you had this dream 14, 15, and you didn't get you were saying the first game at Sky until you were 29.
Yeah.
How did you find that process, sort of as you slowly were breaking into the industry? Did you find it hard? Was it sort of a natural thing? Was it slowly coming to you, or how difficult really was it?
Well, I was lucky that I absolutely adored working in radio, and I got a job. The first full-time job I got in broadcasting was when I was 24, 25, and I saw an advert in the Media Guardian. I was working at Opta, the stats people, but I was working for Capital at the weekends, and I loved working for Opta, but my real passion was the Saturday stuff at Capital. And I saw an advert in the Guardian looking for commentators and reporters to join this new company, and they were launching digital radio stations at several different clubs: Chelsea, Villa, Derby, and Southampton. And I just thought this is a really good opportunity to maybe make that next step. The digital radio was very new; no one was listening, but nonetheless, I took the plunge, and I found myself commentating on every single Chelsea game, home and away, League, Cup, Champions League, on site at all of them. So we were traveling with the team to Barcelona and, Sparta Prague and goodness knows where. Me and Kerry Dixon, the club's third all-time leading goal scorer. And even though we didn't have a huge audience, or we were going out online to a global audience, but, Chelsea games are shown everywhere. So I knew we didn't have a huge audience, but it was such an incredible opportunity, and it was so much fun that I did that for several years. And obviously, the timing for me was incredible because 2 years into that job, less than 2 years, Ken Bates sold the club to Roman Abramovich, and of course, the whole interest in Chelsea went through the roof because they were signing so many players. And suddenly Sky was showing every Chelsea game. And I got to know the Sky commentators because I was sitting next to them on the gantry, literally 3-4 feet away. Our Chelsea commentary position was right next to the Sky one. And so I made it my mission to get to know them and made sure that they know me. And I got to know Martin Tyler and Rob Hawthorne really well. And I gave them, I was really cheeky. I gave them a CD of my radio commentary and just said, look, would you mind having a listen to this and tell me what you think? You know, praying that they wouldn't say, well, you've got no chance, son. But Rob Hawthorne was just an absolute star. And he came back to me, rang me, and he spent about half an hour going through stuff he liked and stuff he thought I could improve on. And I did the same with John Murray from 5 Live, who I really liked. And he sat down in the Chelsea press room with me. He had a notebook and he'd made some notes about my comms. And, you know, that was obviously an enormous help. And of course, timing's everything again, because in 2004, we started broadcasting every Saturday, 3:00 Premier League game for the first time. But when I say broadcasting, I mean to a global audience, and Sky had match choice in the evening. So for the first time, Sky needed commentators on the Saturday 3:00 games. And they were actually short of commentators. So I said to Rob and to Martin, would you put in a good word for me? Do you think I'm good enough? And they both said, yes, they would. And so they spoke to the producer. And even then, it took a long time for that producer to get back to me. And I had to chase him. And I was ballsy. You know, I got his number off Rob and I was phoning him. And I always say to young people who I think are a bit scared of using the phone these days because we have so many other ways of contacting people, that personal touch of them hearing your voice and hearing your enthusiasm is worth so much. So please, please pluck up the courage and actually speak to people on the phone. And I think that's what made all the difference, because literally a week later, he said, okay, I've got a game for you. It's Fulham against Manchester City. It was only about 3 weeks from the end of the season. You'll be with Nigel Spackman. It's a Sky Sports outside broadcast. Here's what I'll pay you. See you later. And I just couldn't believe it. Finally, you know, after all of these months of harassing and haranguing and badgering commentators and producers, it had finally happened. And that's how it started. And I've been doing Match Choice ever since. So that was 2005. It's now 2024. I'm still doing it. And it's led on to other things like, you know, we did the Champions League for a while, but I'm obviously now doing live EFL, WSL, other things come up as well. So yeah, that early bit of badgering and getting myself known, it really paid off in the end.
And that just shows how important it is to be proactive in the industry that we operate in at the minute, Gary.
Honestly, nothing falls in your lap. You have got to sell yourself and you've got to go out there and push yourself, because as you know, this is an industry which is full of people already, and there are many, many more hoping to get in. Our universities are churning them out every single year. So you've got to find a way to make yourself stand out. How can I get my head above the parapet? How can I get noticed? What is it about me that makes me stand out when I'm looking for these jobs? And this is what I tell people all the time. Sometimes it can be something really, really simple. When I got that job at Opta, I decided to do my CV on really thick, expensive paper. And I used a color printer, which was very unusual at the time. And it just got me noticed. They were like, wow, your CV's amazing. And now I get sent CVs from people who are struggling, and I'll say to them, you know, you've got spelling mistakes, there's grammar errors, there things aren't aligned. You've just got, this is your tool. This is how people are getting to know you. This has got to be perfect. So, you know, so something as simple as that can get you noticed.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's definitely some really good advice for anyone listening. And Gary, I just wanted to ask you a few quirky things about the job? Because obviously there's not many people get to be in the gantry and the press area of some of the biggest stadiums in the UK and around the world. And I wanted to ask you, do you have any sort of favorite stadiums out there? Any ones that you see on the schedule and you're like, yes, I love going there?
Well, I love most of them. There are a few that I kind of think, ugh, because of the view, or, I mean, listen, I love going to football matches, so I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but there are one or two stadiums where you might be really low down, or you might be a very long way away from the pitch, and I might think, oh, I'm going to have to really make a huge effort here to get everything absolutely right. If you follow me on social media, you know I'll always post a picture of our view from the gantry. And I think to myself, do people get bored of this? But I always get people saying, thank you so much for doing that, because it's great to see your view. There's a lot of stadiums I really love working at. And it really does come down to how close the gantry is to the pitch. The height has to be absolutely perfect. And they're the ones that I'm really going to enjoy working at. You know, I live in Bournemouth, so I do a lot of Bournemouth games. And obviously that small compact stadium is brilliant because you're never going to be too far away from the pitch. I did many hundreds of games at Chelsea, and I still go there a fair bit. That's very, very high, but I still love that view. I think it's absolutely brilliant. For a long time, the best one was actually Fulham. And now they've built that new stand. It's a completely different view. You're a lot higher. But the old gantry, you were very, very close to the edge of the pitch, and at a perfect height. So you really felt that you were immersed in the action. When you go somewhere like West Ham, and I used to love working at Upton Park. Obviously, the London Stadium is totally different because it's a vast bowl. And where you do the commentary from, you are a long way from the pitch. And actually, if you're working in radio, it's even further. So that wouldn't be one of my favorites, I've got to be honest. I'm very happy to go there, but it wouldn't be one that I would immediately put down as one of my favorites. But I think when you do this job, you've always got to take a step back and think, you're so lucky to be going to 3 football matches a week, or sometimes more. And immersing yourself in that atmosphere and getting to know the people involved and working with brilliant co-coms. So yeah, I try not to moan too much.
Yeah. And do you think that view is something that does affect your commentary? Because I just want to get into sort of the process of actually commentating on a game itself. And do you think it's definitely more helpful as a commentator to be closer to the action? And do you find it a bit more challenging when you're at the likes of the Olympic Stadium to do your commentary?
Yeah, no, of course, because the closer you are, the more of an immersive experience it is. And there are plenty of them. Having said that, I did quite a few games at Portsmouth this season, and the gantry there is very, very low. It's basically just above the dugouts. So you're very, very close to the pitch, but you aren't too far off being at the player's head height. And that presents problems of its own because you don't get much of a sense of the team's shape. And sometimes the angles can be deceptive. And I do find myself looking at the screen quite a bit to get a sense of the play rather than actually looking at the players. Having said that, of course, Fratton Park is a wonderful, wonderful stadium for atmosphere. And I think every time I've been there, it's been a brilliant game, which really helps. So yeah, of course, the view makes a huge, huge difference. And you want to be, listen, it just makes your job easier if you're at the right height and the right distance away from the pitch. If you're not, then you just get on with it. You know, I did the playoffs at the end of last season, and we were at Barnsley, for example, and you couldn't use the gantry simply because it's too small. Once they put 2 or 3 cameras up there wasn't room for us. So they had to make room for us elsewhere in the stadium. And it wasn't necessarily where I would have put it, but it was what it was. And, you know, you just get on with it, don't you? And then we were at Crawley in League Two, And again, the gantry is brilliant there, but it's a box and it's very, very small. And they just said, we can't fit you guys in with the cameras. So we're just going to put you on basically a normal row where the fans sit. And again, that was quite something because we had fans in front of us, fans behind it, and it felt like we were just fans at a game, you know? And at half time, we were able to just turn around and chat to them, which is very unusual. But I really love that because I think you want to feel a bit like a fan with a microphone at times. Obviously you want to be professional, but we're in it because we love football. And, you know, I've spent many years following my team home and away, and being a fan is such a wonderful thing. So if you're in amongst the fans and just happen to have a microphone, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask you about the sort of preparation leading up to a game. Jim went into the sort of how his preparation, I was asking about the Euros and him going to Germany, about how his differed so much to one of his colleagues, one being highly organised weeks in advance, and Jim saying they would be more closer to the time. Has your preparation always been the same? And I really wanted to ask you, do you find, now that you've had years of experience, do you find commentating easy, or do you still find it challenging?
Well, the preparation is very much the same. And I'm with Jim. I like to do the preparation as close to the game as possible. And I think you've got to remember, I did 115 games last season. Jim might well have done more because of his radio and TV commitments. But if you've got 3 or 4 games in a week, you can't really start working on the one that's fourth in line when you've got 3. Otherwise, you might have a fact in your head about a game that's, you know, 5 days away, and you're thinking, well, hang on, is that for this game or is that for a game in 3 days' time? So I try and do it as close to the game as I can. In terms of whether I find it easy or not, well, it's just something that it's all I've done for years. So people say, do you get nervous? And I absolutely don't get nervous, but you still feel that enormous rush of excitement and the adrenaline of being at a game. And obviously when you're doing a live game and you've got the presenter, you know, David Prutton or Michelle Owen or whoever it is, and you know they're about to cue to you, you've got that huge rush of adrenaline when they're about to say, let's join our commentators, you know, Don Goodman and Gary Taphouse. So, and then it's all on you, you know. There's no one saying, right, Gary, what have you written for that opener? What have you written for this? It's entirely your creative juices flowing, and you have an awful lot of autonomy as a commentator. I'm not sure if people what people expect, but I will literally write my own script and no one checks it. It's entirely down to me, and I might give my outwords for the teams, but otherwise it's, you know, it's about what I want to say. And so yeah, that's obviously absolutely thrilling and exciting, and that's a fantastic part of the job. It really is. Do I find it easy? Well, it's kind of second nature because, you know, when you've done 2,000 games like I have or more, then yeah, it's kind of, it is just kind of second nature. What I would say is you're always improving. And I don't ever think to myself, well, I'm the finished article, because I think every time you do a game, you learn something, or you come away thinking, why did I say that? Or why didn't I say that? Or why didn't I think about that then? You know, and again, a bit of advice for people, if you are sort of getting into commentating, I won't listen to something that I've done in the last week. I will leave that completely. I won't ever listen to it. But what I will do is listen to something from 6 months or a year ago, because I won't remember the game, because I've probably done 50, 60, 70 games since then. So I'm kind of watching it with fresh eyes, and I'll listen to what I said, and I'll think to myself, if I was a viewer, what would I think of that? And I'll think, I like that bit. I wish I hadn't said that. And I'll be really tough with myself. And my wife, I'll get her involved as well, because she's really tough, and she'll really tell me like it is. And she'll say, I don't know what you were thinking there. Or she might grudgingly say, that was good. And it's just about that sort of self-improvement. So I'll listen to older stuff. So I don't know what's coming. I don't know when the goal's coming. And I'll listen to it with fresh ears and think, well, I did that bit well, but I could definitely have phrased that better. Or I repeated the word brilliant twice in the space of a minute there. I shouldn't have done that. And I think it's just a constant process of getting better and better.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting to hear you speak about that kind of stuff, Gary. And I wanted to ask you just about the industry as a whole. Um, Obviously, like many other sports journalists, I follow you on Twitter, and because it's very, very, very effective way of getting those job vacancies posted every single day and sort of keeping up to date with what's happening in the industry. Um, do you feel like that's something that you find yourself needing to give back to the industry? And what do you think are the sort of biggest challenges that we face as a whole at the minute?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Lewis, because it's a big part of my day. It's become a bit of a full-time job. I'll just briefly explain how that started. So I was doing some lecturing at this university, a sports journalism course. Actually, it was a sports broadcasting course, I think. And they asked me to do a little module on commentary. And I happened to see, after the second or third week, I saw a job at Sky Sports. And I thought, do you know what? My students would be really interested in this. So I tweeted it. And on the back of that, it got shared loads. And on the back of that, I was getting other companies saying, oh, would you mind tweeting our job as well? And before I knew it, I was doing like 12 a day or more. And sometimes these jobs aren't even being advertised elsewhere. These canny companies have realized that I've got a captive audience of goodness knows how many thousand people looking for work in the industry, and they're all highly qualified and ready to go in. And they don't need to spend loads of money advertising. They just put it on my Twitter feed. I should be charging. But I'll tell you what's absolutely brilliant about it is that every week I get messages from people who've seen a job on my feed and they're now in the industry and they've got the job. And I'll say to them, look, all I've done is pass on the link. You've done all the hard work, but it's fantastic to play a small part in people's journeys. And yes, I do think we all need to be giving back because it is such a tough industry. And like I said to you earlier, there's more and more people wanting to be a part of it. And it's not like the number of jobs in the industry is growing exponentially to keep up with that. So it's getting tougher and tougher for young people getting in the industry. And you've really got to back yourself, and you've got to be super motivated to stick with it. And, you know, I've had to work with one or two people who've come to me and said, look, I'm just so demotivated because it's not happening. And I'll work with them and say, well, you know, what's your CV like? How are you presenting the work that you've done? And, you know, there'll be some fairly basic mistakes, I can guarantee it. And I'll try and help people that way. And I think if you get in touch with a lot of people in our industry, people do naturally want to help. I work with the John Schofield Trust, so I've always got one or two mentees on the go. They try and give me people who want to be commentators, but actually I'm with one at the moment who is a writer and actually very interested in the digital side of things. So yeah, I think we should all definitely try and do our best to help people in the industry. And I will, you know, I get, and I'm not exaggerating, sometimes 200 messages a week from people, and I always try and get back to them. It may take me some time, but I'll always reply to people because, you know, when I was in that position and I was getting in touch with people, sometimes I wouldn't get any response, and it was so demotivating. And that's why I think back to the likes of John Murray and Rob Hawthorne and Martin Tyler, and the way they helped me. I just think I've got to try and do the same, for sure.
Gary, it's been great speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time today.